At first, it was just a feeling of admiration, so he became the Marquise's dog, to gain a higher position, to gain more power. He just wanted to be by her side, and get a little closer to her, because it was just impossible for someone like her to pay attention to someone of his status. He fought so hard, killing and murdering countless people, in a dirty and bloody manner. He looked down at his hand. He could still smell the blood that had long since been washed away. He tightened his fist. She was the reason he struggled so much, but in the end this happened. That's why he loathed her. He wanted to put all the blame on her. It took his blood and sacrifice for her to be happy. It was all because of her that he turned out like that, because she was so innocent and naive, because everything about him started with her. A wave of every dirty, inferior emotion flooded his chest. Heiner's body slowly collapsed. He cradled his head in his hands. The man crouched in the corner and sobbed quietly. Padania, Southern Island, Royal Secret Military Training Center. Dull thud echoed in the warehouse. A group of people surrounded a boy who was lying curled up. Seeing the boy who had not shed a single groan, one of them who had been beating him asked others if the young boy was even skilled. They were taking their frustration out on him. Because of him they were also dragged into training. The woman who was only watching all of this without care until now, told them they have to go now. One of the boys got angry hearing that. The girl near him stopped him from doing something stupid. The woman grabbed the boy's face. She was annoyed. She told them before that they should not touch his face. Those people didn't care. They only laughed before leaving. The woman also left saying they shouldn't have left scars on his handsome face. The boy was coughing. He somehow raised his upper body in a heap and dragged himself toward the wall. He sat leaning against the wall. He spat out a plop of blood. His whole body ached. His eyes were soulless. The name of the boy was Heiner Valdemar. He was 15 years old. The instructor told them that they would begin the 40-second survival training from now on. The game would last for 3 hours. Points would be awarded for retrieving each other's name tags. Participants must reach the finish line within the designated time. Weapons would be provided according to the points accumulated by each trainee. Also, there were no rules in combat, so it's up to them how they want to fight. Heiner was given a jackknife. He looked at the boy named Ethan. He wondered if Ethan could handle it. Ethan looked nervous. It was obvious that he didn't want to be part of all of this. Last night when Heiner was sorting through his textbooks, Ethan approached him. He asked Heiner if he was all right. Tomorrow was the survival training day. Heiner looked at his bruised arm, and said he was feeling just so-so. Ethan sympathized with him. Since he knew that Heiner was being bullied by the seniors, Heiner admitted that it was not easy to move because of them. Ethan hesitated to speak for a moment. Then he said, "By any chance if we run into each other during the survival training tomorrow, let's just pretend not to recognize each other." Heiner thought for a moment, then asked if anyone else had agreed to it other than him. Ethan replied that he had made an agreement with Hugo and Stefan as well. He asked Heiner again for his opinion on this proposal. "Okay," Heiner agreed after thinking for a moment. Ethan's face brightened hearing his answer. They made an agreement that they would not stab each other in the back. "I hope everyone stays alive till the end. The training begins now." As soon as the instructor finished his sentence, there was a green signal round was fired into the sky. The trainees sprang forward. Heiner ran straight into the grass at a frightening speed. It was Royal Secret Military Training Camp, situated on Southern Island. They trained spies and informants intensively here. Most of them were orphan teenagers. The royal family disposed of orphans under the pretext of street beautification. Heiner grabbed the handgun that had fallen to the ground and checked the ammunition. Heiner began running through the forest again. He also lost his parents and grew up in an orphanage. He was also boarded the Southern Line at the age of 12, 7 years until graduation, with a survival rate of around 30%. A flying bullet struck a tree near his head. Heiner, who had escaped death by the slightest margin, quickly hid behind the tree. Gunshot could be heard from the other side, and he heard a familiar voice. It was the group of seniors who bullied him. The girl was bored of all of this. Two of them got into an argument. Heiner stood leaning against the tree. He needed to be careful. Benjamin was quite skilled. Heiner could handle 1 or 2, but they were 4 over there. There must be another way. "Hey, is this your friend?" The senior kicked something over. It was a dead body. When Heiner checked the corpse's head, it was a familiar figure. It was Ethan who talked to him last night. They tried to help each other, but he was already dead. "Hey, third year, come out quickly. You should accompany your friend on the journey to the afterlife." The seniors chuckled and taunted Heiner. They chuckled at their own low-grade jokes. Heiner quietly regained his grip on his pistol. The reason he had only been taking hits all this time was because winning alone could not stop the repetitive reality, especially in such a confined space. There's nothing worth being under the spotlight. In this survival training ground, murder was condoned. It also meant that he could see the end. "Thanks to you, Your Excellence, the facilities of the training camp are improving, and education is becoming more systematic," the supervisor told the man who was sitting on the chair. The man was Dietrich Rosenberg. He was the head of the Special Operation Division. "The facilities don't need to be good. Those useless lazy creatures, they will just lie down if they are comfortable. Keep only the minimum number alive. It will just increase the mouths to feed if more of them survive," said Marcus Dietrich, as he looked down at the training ground from his vantage point on the hill. The supervisor nodded in agreement and said that they were trying to get rid of them as much as possible through survival training. The Marcus asked if there were any standouts among the graduating. The supervisor informed that there were quite a few, especially Benjamin, who visited his mansion. Dietrich remembered the boy. The instructor said Benjamin was the best one. Shortly after signal round was fired, indicating that the training was over. "It's time to see how many of them survived." Marcus looked down at them with a bored expression. Trainees could be seen coming up from the bottom of the hill. They all looked exhausted and injured. Marcus wasn't really impressed with them. Suddenly, something caught his attention. A dark-haired trainee was staggering up from below. Even from a distance his injuries looked quite serious. He caught Marcus' interest. The supervisor informed him that the boy was Heiner, a third-year trainee, and he's not the one to be trifled with. The instructor was shocked when Heiner handed him the flags and name tags. The instructor called the supervisor. He told him what happened. The supervisor was also bewildered. He walked back to the Marcus and told him that Benjamin, whom he mentioned earlier, was dead. All 4 members of the graduating class who were with him were dead. They all fell victim to one person. The Marquises listened with interest. His gaze turned again to Heiner. Heiner was receiving first aid. As he removed his training uniform, blood gushed from his side where the bullet had grazed him. After the survival training, Heiner was confined to bed for some time. "Dealing with those bastards and just getting this much injured is forgiving enough. How on earth did you manage to kill those seniors, moreover 4 of them at once?" asked the boy leaning back against his chair. Heiner was neither happy nor sad as he answered that. He was accustomed to their violence itself. He learned it thoroughly at the orphanage. The boy was surprised, then laughed and asked if he had done this for Ethan's revenge. Heiner laid back on the bed as he answered, "Not particularly, it just ended up that way." Then the boy said that now no one could mess with him anymore. He should stick with him. Heiner kept his eyes closed and didn't answer. He was really tired. Suddenly, without a knock, the door to the room slammed open. Heiner and the boy named Hugo looked at the door at the same time. Their instructor was standing in front of the room. Hugo bounced out of his seat and raised his hand in a salute. Heiner also tried to get up from the bed, but the instructor waved him off, telling him to rest, and asked about his condition. Heiner said he was fine. The instructor told him there's a clinic on the first floor of the instructor building. He should get treatment there as soon as daybreak begins. The instructor also informed Heiner that the Marquis had invited him to a lunch banquet. It's at the Rosenberg mansion this Saturday, so he should be ready as they would be boarding a ship in the morning. Heiner said he understood and thanked the instructor. The instructor left the room after briefly conveying his business. Silence reigned for a moment. Hugo, who had been quietly astonished, looked back at Heiner. Hugo screamed with a face full of excitement. "You got an invitation from Marcus Dietrich, isn't where only top students from the graduation class go? Wow, this is insane. You have hit the jackpot in life. You could even join Marquise's Special Operations Unit." Hugo could not contain his excitement. Heiner, who had been listening quietly to Hugo's words, murmured with a face devoid of laughter, "Ethan would have been jealous if he had heard it." Hugo thought for a moment and said, "Yeah, that's right. It was his lifelong dream to join that unit." Heiner's eyes brightened with a past memory. He remembered the time they spent together and how enthusiastically Ethan used to talk about Rosenberg Mansion. But they didn't have the luxury to grieve. They knew how to get used to the loss. They waited for the arrival of their new roommate. The Podanian royal family assigned missions to agents from the training camp. that regular army couldn't handle, but at the same time they wanted them to remain undercover. Those from the training camp could not enlist in the regular army, but Marcus Dietrich's Special Operations Unit was an exception. Every trainee dreams of being there. The Rosenberg mansion was splendid, as if it were made of every beautiful and rare thing in the world melted together. Even Heiner, who was not easily moved by most things, stopped in his tracks by the opulence. There was a huge lion statue. The square column supporting the lion statue had a script in an ancient language. Standing in front of it, Heiner thought he looked like a little ant. He didn't know such a mansion existed. Inside the dining hall was a long table. The Marcus sat at the top, followed by the supervisors and officers, and the trainees sat in a row below. The food was new to him. He had never seen such dishes before. It was his first time seeing luxury at such level. He looked up and saw a huge mural on the ceiling. It was also his first time seeing such a beautiful girl. Even to Heiner, who was a complete stranger to art, it was a solemn mural painted with an incredibly delicate touch. When Marcus Dietrich confirmed that Heiner was looking at the ceiling, he suddenly opened his mouth. It's a 200-year-old mural. Heiner's eyes fell on Marcus Dietrich. He quickly apologized and said it was his first time seeing such a magnificent painting. I understand. Even nobles would be amazed, let alone commoners. It feels sacred looking at that ceiling painting, Marcus said proudly. It was obvious that this mural was one of his greatest pride. As soon as the Marcus finished his sentence, people began to compliment. Heiner let their words sink in, and gaze up at the mural for a long time. His eyes stopped for a long moment on a saint praying with her hands clasped together. The saint's face, shining brightly in the light, was holy and sacred. Heiner had never believed in a divine existence even once, yet somehow he felt that the saint was seeking forgiveness for all the sins of everyone here. It was a rather odd feeling. It was as if he could understand why people believed in God. After the dinner, the trainees went out to the rose garden of the mansion. The rose garden of Rosenberg was truly beautiful. He felt sorry for Ethan. He would have loved to see it. Suddenly a deputy hurriedly approached the Marcus. After that, Marcus started leaving, saying he had some work to attend to. The deputy told them that the returning carriage departs at 4 o'clock. Until then they were free to explore the garden. The butler would assist them if they had any questions. Then he told the trainees to be grateful to the Marcus for the invitation. After the deputy explained everything, the trainees started exploring the garden. There's still some time left. Heiner felt so tired, probably because he wasn't fully recovered. He intended to rest in a corner of the yard. Soon he found a bench among the vines, placed in the shade of the trees. The area was empty and peaceful. Heiner lay on the bench for a long time. He wished he could go back soon. At that moment, a piano melody was carried in the wind from somewhere. He opened his eyes. The sound was very faint, but Heiner recognized it clearly. It was a familiar melody. He didn't know whose tune it was, or what was the title of the song, but this melody was closest to his heart. Heiner had a small music box in the past. The music from the music box was like a lullaby that no one had ever sung to him. He wondered where it was coming from. His feet moved on its own, following the sound of the piano. The sound of the piano gradually became clearer. Eventually Heiner arrived in front of a building in a secluded area. The sound of the piano was streaming from an open window. Heiner approached the window with quiet steps. The curtains were still half drawn on the window. He slowly popped his head out. A large piano, white and black keys, tiny hands, braided blonde hair, downcast eyes, sacred and holy face. Heiner couldn't move, as if his breath had caught in his throat. A small body shining brightly. She looked entirely different from him. A noble, divine, and beautiful human. He felt an emotion similar to, but more intense than the one he had felt when he saw the saint in the mural. Heiner involuntarily backed away. Branches were stepped on and crushed under his feet. He inhaled quietly. At the same time the piano stopped playing. The girl turned her head. The piano chair was pushed back gingerly in the room. He heard small shoes approaching the window. Heiner fled from there. The girl looked out of the window, but no one was there. Heiner could not stop running. Fragments of old memories creaked and assembled in his head. The melody of that time. He clearly remembered that piano piece. During his time at the orphanage, the music box had been given to him as a gift by a noble woman, who had volunteered at the orphanage. The music box was the first precious thing that young Heiner acquired, and it instantly captivated the little boy. He intuited that he would never get anything like it again in his life. Every day, Heiner would hide deep in the backyard of the orphanage and listen to the music box. Less than a few days later, another boy from the orphanage stole the music box. The boy was older and bigger than him. Heiner struggled with the boy to get the music box back, however the music box broke and shattered to pieces during their struggle. Throughout his life, Heiner would look back on this moment countless times. Why on earth had he run away at that moment? Why didn't he just say that he had not snuck into the garden, that he had just stumbled upon it while out for a walk? Why didn't he just tell her that her performance was really good? Heiner tried to fix the broken music box, but failed. Something like music was utterly useless for survival, but he just couldn't throw it away. This was the melody that had been playing on that music box. At that time Heiner did not know who the girl was, but this moment unexpectedly woven into his life. It became the eternal focus of his life. Heiner soon learned that the girl was the only daughter of the Marcus Dietrich. She dreamt of becoming a pianist. He was not so surprised. There's no way someone as noble-looking as her could be as common as him. She was born into a complete different world from him. Their status was incomparable from birth. She was the only daughter of the Rosenberg family, carrying the blood of royalty, and he was just one of the many chess pieces in the training camp. From cradle to grave she was going to live a completely different life from him. Moreover, he had to endure pain all the time. Because his injuries weren't fully healed, it was no big deal for a trainee to get hurt or die. Normally, people turned a blind eye and moved on. Heiner was suddenly aware of his situation. He was of a status that could not even be compared. Thinking about it only made him miserable. Hugo walked into the training ground with something in his hand. Hugo threw Heiner a water bottle. He scolded Heiner for his recent behavior. Heiner told him that his wound wasn't healed. The wound on his side, which had barely healed, was torn. His shirt was slowly wet with blood, but Heiner didn't have the strength to walk to the infirmary, so he just sat down under a tree. Hugo asked Heiner if he could make a flute out of this reed. Heiner could not understand how would that work as a flute. Hugo gave him one of the reeds. Hugo sat down next to Heiner, and Heiner listened to his explanation quite carefully. Heiner imitated Hugo's method quite well. He looked around at the grass flute with a dubious expression on his face. He tried blowing into the entrance, but all he heard was a whoosh of air. Seeing this, Hugo could not stop laughing. Hugo then put his mouth over the entrance of the grass flute and blew on it very gently. It sounded like a broken whistle. It was not at all the instrumental sound that Heiner had in mind. Hugo was so proud of himself, but Heiner wasn't really impressed. He looked down vacantly at the grass whistle he had made. He even thought he could play that tune. In the first place, there was no way that a proper instrument could be made from a single reed. What in the world did he expect? How wonderful would it be if it could play the sound like her piano? He wanted to hear that melody again. He wanted to go back to that moment just one more time. Heiner was unremarkable compared to his talent and ability. He literally did his best. He did everything he could. If anyone were to ask, they would think he was crazy, because the only reason why he endured bloody training to get the top spot was to listen to the piano play. He had been an excellent trainee, and soon he was transformed into the top of his class. The Marcus also watched the boy from his window. He could see his dedication. After that, Heiner was invited to every dinner party at the Marquises. Heiner didn't have any dreams. He didn't even want to succeed. He didn't wish for anything, but in that moment, he yearned for it. When he listened to that girl's piano performance, it felt like only that girl and he were left in a world filled with sounds and soft piano notes. For that moment, his life seemed so much better. Heiner crouched in the grass and hugged his legs. As the girl's fingers moved back and forth over the keys, Heiner felt as if he were floating somewhere in the air. The performance took him to a foreign country beyond the hard sea. Not in this cold reality, but somewhere else, where only their heart and twist in happiness. He felt as if the sense of the world under his feet had completely disappeared. The doctor asked him about his condition. He answered he felt same as usual. The doctor said he seemed a bit different. Heiner could not understand what she meant. The doctor's expression was sad. It was a drug therapy for emotional suppression. It was one of the essential procedures that all trainees must undergo. Heiner bowed his head and started leaving, but he turned around when doctor called his name. The doctor told him not to push himself too hard. She said with a sad expression that she had been working here for 12 years, and she had never seen a trainee with a good ending. Aspiring for something could be poisonous for him. Heiner looked at the doctor, unable to answer. The doctor, with her back to the white curtains, smiled faintly, and said that he should take it easy. The doctor was found hanged the next day. Aspiring for something could be poisonous for you. The doctor's words kept repeating in his mind. The seasons changed twice. In the cold winter, solitary training, which came every 6 months, began. In solitary confinement, there was no light, no one to talk to, nothing to read. In fact, it was a bit exaggerated to name the training. It was simply the confinement of a trainee in a room for 3 days. After a certain period of time, in a space that was closed to the influx of new information, one's psyche became weak. At this time, brainwashing education allowed trainees to absorb the relevant information like a sponge. They would think of it as information that they thought up on their own, rather than information that came in from the outside. Thus the trainees were all brainwashed to some degree. This was also the reason why there was little questioning or rebellion against the anti-human rights regime on the island itself. Heiner was no different. He had never considered the gap to be unreasonable or unfair. It was only after seeing the girl that Heiner first felt miserable about his situation. Why am I like this, while you are infinitely clean, virtuous and beautiful? I was not born wanting to be born like this, but it happened. I wish I had been born in a certain decent family, so I could talk to you like your equals. I know you will smile kindly and accept me. We might have a longer talk. In the boy's head, lying crouched in the corner of his cell, the little Rosenberg girl knew him. The girl of noble status greeted him with a smile. She asked him how he was, and if he was all right where he was injured. It was funny, Heiner didn't even know the girl's voice. She was wearing a white dress that was long to her knees. What do you enjoy the most? Asked the girl. I enjoy hearing you play the piano, Heiner answered in a daze. Then, should I play the piano for you? Asked the girl, smiling. In that case, would you mind playing this song for me? He handed the piano box to the girl. Wow, it's so pretty, it looks like the two of us, said the girl with sparkling blue eyes. She listened to the tune of the music box. Then she said, do you like this song too? Very well, I will play it for you. Saying that, the little girl ran to the piano. Heiner followed her. He did not hide himself in the grass like before. The girl who spoke with a smile turned her head towards him, as her white hands fell slowly on the keys. There, he was the girl's only audience, just as she was his only pianist. The end of the thought always resulted in a cruel reality. The more he thought about the girl, the lower and unhappier he became. Winter rain fell that day. Wet grass was trampled underfoot. Heiner walked closer to the white building, breaking through the overgrown leaves. The windows of the practice room were closed today, and he could only listen to the performance by listening very closely. He moved somewhat recklessly closer. The faint music sound played in his ears. Cold raindrops fell from the sky, and the constant melody echoed in his ears. Unlike her in the warm, cozy room, he stood in the cold rain. A chill was drifting through his body, along with a terrible sense of reality. If that child were to learn of his existence, she would surely feel a sense of loss, empathize with him, and be filled with anger. What he was experiencing was far from the range of pain the girl could ever imagine. Perhaps the girl did not even know that there was such a thing as training camp. She is a noble and sacred being. At the most, the girl's pain would be from having a hard time practicing the piano. No one would dare to administer strange drugs to her. No one would ever violate her, or lock her up in a solitary confinement. It was a well-known fact that the Marquis loved his only daughter dearly. He would have raised her to see and hear only good things. His precious daughter would not need to know about trainees, who were undergoing cruel training. Time flowed like running water. 4 years had passed. The Marquis congratulated the trainees. From this day forward, they were all members of the Special Task Force. Heiner, who had never missed a dinner at the Marquis, graduated from the training camp with exceptional grades. He immediately enlisted in the Special Operation Corps. With a new mission assigned, his return to Padania was on hold for the foreseeable future. Therefore, he must prove his loyalty and competence, even at the risk of his life. If he could demonstrate his skills in the Special Task Forces unit, he would be eligible to join the regular army. Doing so would bring him closer to her position, even if it's just a little. Heiner looked for the girl one last time before leaving. The long and strong legs crossed the garden. In 4 years he had become a distinct young man. Heiner approached the building with silent steps. The curtains were wide open. For 4 years, the girl had also grown up. She repeatedly pressed the keys and released them again. She seemed to measure the sound, putting the harmonies in slightly different ways. Heiner stared at the scene with eyes half nostalgic and half bitter. He was holding a bouquet of starlings and hydrangeas in his arms. The girl's fingers fell on the keys again. The chords that had been reworked countless times echoed in harmony. The girl had her eyes closed. She always looked so wholly in front of the piano. He could not take his gaze away from her profile, knowing that it was just an illusion that the music was giving him. Heiner felt a tremendous sense of familiarity. It was an extraordinary, truly impossible familiarity. He was not sure if the music captivated him, or if she captivated him. He returned to his usual cold face, and looked at the bouquet of flowers in his hand. He slowly placed the bouquet on the window sill. Unlike his cold face, his hands were very careful. Heiner's lips silently pressed thin. At the same time the keys were pressed, and the piano sounded. Blue petals swayed along the wave-like melody. Time continued to pass. Heiner traveled abroad, completing 3 short-term assignments and 2 long-term ones. In the process he joined Marquise's entourage. Of course, due to nature of the Special Operations Unit, this was never official. Heiner always worked as a shadow. Only those involved knew of his exploits. Whenever he returned to the country, Heiner was invited to the residence of the Marquis. He was greeted with congratulations, and he always went looking for the girl. Rosenberg's precious lady entered the social world several years ago, and received many courtships. Everyone, young and old, loved her. She also became a real pianist. She won prizes in several world competitions and even gave private recitals. 5 years later, summer of 721, Rosenberg Mansion. Heiner was talking with a colleague, when he saw a woman with a slender neck, walking like a swan. The girl, she had grown so much that he could no longer call her that. Her small body had filled out, and her features had matured elegantly and seductively. The chubby face and childish cuteness in his memory had disappeared, and a perfect ladylike figure was in its place. Heiner could not take his eyes off her. It was the first time he had seen her outside of the practice room. The Marquise's daughter is really pretty, just as the rumors says. She's really a different kind of class from us by nature, isn't it? Jackson said admiringly. Indeed, Heiner replied huskily, even though he knew that fact well. Jackson's words came to him anew. After returning from completing a few missions, he found the practice room completely empty. He was told it had been moved to the inner part of the mansion. Thus, for the past 8 months, he had not seen her once. During the mission, he was injured countless times, had been on the brink of death several times, and had lost many of his comrades. Still, he endured for the sake of Annette Rosenberg. She was the most beautiful and noble lady in Padania. Is that really possible for someone like him to stand next to her? No matter how hard he struggled to climb, he would never be able to reach her feet. Look at this bastard, he can't take his eyes off her. Jackson's blunt voice woke Heiner from his thoughts. It was just a glance at her. Heiner replied causally, mentally cursing at his carelessness. Miss Rosenberg is really beautiful. Even the infamous Heiner could not take his eyes off her. Jackson chuckled and continued to tease him. Heiner was silent, as if Jackson didn't deserve an answer. Hey, give it one good try. You're just pretending not to notice despite being good-looking. Lady Rosenberg is quite romantic, and cares about appearances, so, it's not like she only meets high-ranking people. Despite her looks, she's stubborn, and even the Marquis can't interfere in her love life, Jackson told him. Raising an eyebrow, Heiner frowned and said, but even if it's just dating, it has to be someone of the highest middle class or above. Heiner knew they were different from birth, the kind that could not be changed by hard work. If you officially enlist, your rank will immediately rise, but you'll have to hide the fact that we're from the training camp, Jackson said laughing. Heiner kept walking, as he dismissed Jackson's words as nonsense. Though, in his head, jealousy thoughts of what kind of men she met were running, Heiner felt something inside him being chipped away. He gently bit his lower lip. A low curse escaped. A sudden wave of dejected feelings flooded him. Padania Special Unit was on mission. Anne lit the firewood. Soon there was a crackling sound, and red dots began to arise on the surface. We just need to move 47 kilometers more from here, said Anne as he looked at the map. You call it just? I already can't feel my feet walking too much, said Hugo. Jackson felt the same. Heiner silently stirred the stew in his tin can. As trivial talk was exchanged, his colleagues were making fun of him. It was originally forbidden for colleagues to get to know each other beyond a certain degree, since personal feelings would interfere with the operation. However, this time, the members were people who had crossed the threshold of life and death together in a previous long-term project. Regardless of intentions or reason, they had no choice but to become closer to some extent. Then Anne mentioned that he had a lover. Surprised, Hugo asked why he was dating, when he could not even get married, and said he was just happy loving right now, and teased his colleagues, since they had never been in a relationship. Jackson said if he were the instructor, he would make sure that no one gets in a relationship, since it can be a weakness. Hugo said he would cherish what's precious to him. He made a funny face saying that. The seemingly light tone of the conversation sounded like everyday talk, but the actual situation was not. Heiner, what's precious to you? Do you have any hidden lover? Anne asked Heiner. Jackson laughed and said, hey, do you really think someone as stone-faced as him have a lover? There are quite a few girls who like guys like him, you know, Anne answered. Anyway, if you get one, would you cherish her, or are you the possessive type? Anne asked. Heiner answered Anne's barrage of questions curtly. Even if I cherish her, it's pointless. What's precious to me is precious to others too, so she will be taken away eventually. Anne was surprised and said, man, that's heartbreaking, so you will just let her be taken? Heiner mumbled as he stared at the stew. If she's going to be taken, it's better to destroy her, that way she won't be precious to others anymore. His answer shocked Anne. That answer sounds psychopathic. You're out of your mind, Anne said with disgust. At this Hugo said that no one who was stuck in this island corner would be sane. Hugo was right. All the trainees on Southerlane Island lived with a tattered spirit, but perhaps he was more broken than they were, so much so that he could not even value the precious things. Heiner knew that his feelings for the girl were probably not normal either. Endless crumbling thoughts rose like haze. She was always in the cause and effect. I think only of her, and look only at her, but she doesn't look at me, she never think of me, she doesn't even know I exist. The heart, deformed from the start, became more distorted and coarse. The more it grew, precious things always made him unhappy, like the broken music box, and like her, who was unreachable. If such an emotion was so important, it would be better to have nothing at all. The screams and cries of others coming from the torture chamber could be heard in graphic detail. Heiner was confined to a dark, damp cell. It was also a place he was quite familiar with. At times, Heiner could recognize his colleagues' screams. It was closer to an animal's voice than a person's. The operation was almost a failure. There was a traitor among them, and almost all the Special Operations members were captured. Only Jackson managed to escape. Heiner made an effort to remain calm. Jackson was a capable operative. Heiner believed Jackson would definitely bring reinforcement. They just had to hold out until then. Unknown amount of time passed in the darkness. At one moment, the cell door opened with an old creaking sound. A total of 3 people stood in front of the door. They were guards dressed in brown uniforms and carrying clubs. They did not carry him into the interrogation room, or drag him to a cold chair. They began beating Heiner without saying anything. Heiner's body bent at his waist. A rumbling sound popped out of his throat. The guards kicked him again. His whole body seemed to be torn into pieces. He would rather have fainted, but his mind was clearer with each blow. Soon he collapsed to the floor. Heiner let out a muffled groans and screams as he crouched like a dying animal. The guards didn't stop, as they kept beating him for a long time. His unrecovered body screamed. A completely unfamiliar pain engulfed his brain. He had gotten used to being beaten, but he could not stand it every time. At one point, the guards dragged Heiner out of his cell. Heiner was made to sit on a cold steel chair in the interrogation room. He was too dazed to properly perceive the situation. The interrogator, wearing rimless glasses, folded his hands across from him, said, "Now let's have a little conversation. Your comrades have already opened their mouth. They've spilled everything. I'm sure you know more details." "You are lying," Heiner responded cynically. The interrogator chuckled and asked, "Lying? Why do you think I'm lying?" At this Heiner said, "You said they've spilled everything, but you can't get the exact information." "Well, each of them has different information. They seem like bloody bastards of Marquis Dietrich," said the instructor. He was trying to instilling in Heiner a distrust of his colleagues. Heiner's expression cracked slightly. The instructor knew who was behind them. It could not be ruled out that someone already opened their mouth. or the person who tipped them off in the first place already knew everything? If that was the case, who the hell was that traitor? Heiner tried to use his head, but it didn't work the way he wanted it to. He was having a hard time just to be conscious. The interrogator questioned him various questions, and when he didn't get the answer he wanted, Heiner was punched in the head, or slapped in the face. All right, what about this? Just tell me plausible information. It doesn't have to be classified, and I promise to spare your life, and later, apologize to your comrades. Tell them you have disclosed everything you know. Say since we are all going to die anyway, let's just spill the beans together. The interrogator tilted his head with a twinkle in his eyes, as if it were a good suggestion. Heiner confessed nothing, because he remained loyal to Padania, and had not yet given up hope. Jackson had not been captured. He was a capable man. Surely he would take some action, or he could ask the Marquis for help. Heiner thought that there would be a prisoner exchange in the near future, or that a rescue troop would come. He would just have to hold out until then. When Heiner didn't answer, the interrogator said, "Well, okay, I will give you some time. While you are pondering, I will interrogate your comrades." Heiner looked at the interrogator with disgust. He didn't want to die, but his reasons for not accepting the interrogator's proposals was because he knew that they were not going to let him live anyway. The interrogator called loudly for the guards. Soon after, the guards entered the interrogation room. They roughly helped Heiner to his feet. Heiner staggered. His legs had no strength. It felt like a very long time had passed. One day the guards brought him back to the interrogation room. Someone was sitting on the other side of the desk. It was Hugo. He was literally looking horrendous. Heiner was speechless as he looked at him. Heiner might not be able to tell without a mirror, but he probably wouldn't be much different than him. After looking down at the desk for a while, Hugo finally opened his mouth. A dry voice poured out, scratching at his throat. "Heiner, let's talk." "What?" Heiner asked back, as if he doubted what he had heard. Hugo said again, "Let's just blow it as it is. What's the use of holding on like this?" "What are you talking about? Did the guards threaten you?" Heiner asked. "No, it's not that. They won't spare us. I'd rather just spill it all, and die quickly." Hugo's red, swollen eyes were unfocused and vacant. "Why are you suddenly talking like this?" Anger was in Heiner's voice. As any trainee would say, Hugo was greatly loyal to his country. Heiner couldn't understand why he would suddenly say such a thing, but Hugo continued without batting an eye. "Heiner, do you know who betrayed us?" "It's Jackson." Heiner was in disbelief. "The interrogator told me he was a spy for France." "No wonder. It seemed odd. It doesn't make sense. He escaped alone so easily." Heiner opened his mouth and closed it again, the back of his head cool. Actually, maybe, just maybe, he had expected it. He just couldn't admit it by a long shot. Hugo said in a cracked voice, "I'm not so sure anymore. Jackson was also my classmate at the training camp, but then he was brought in there as a spy from an early age. To be raised as a spy from an early age. I wonder how much he was brainwashed in France. I really can't guess. Anyway, we are in this mess because of him. I just wish we could kill him quickly." Heiner stared at him, speechless. Hugo was a completely different person now. "Heiner, if things had gone as they were, I would have been dead long ago during the training. I learned a lot from watching you. Thanks to you, I even made it to France. I have been really grateful to you all this time," Hugo said with a genuine smile on his face. It was a painful and emotional sight to see. Heiner wasn't able to say anything in return. The guards dragged Hugo out of the room. Heiner's hands were trembling. He tried to clench his fist, but he could not do it. Several days later, the guards put Heiner's hands together and handcuffed him. It was a typical torture position. The interrogator walked in front of Heiner and said, "You still won't open your mouth. Everyone's information is fragmented. It's hard to understand. Two have already died. If only you would speak, the puzzle would come together. I don't understand why you can't think straight, even though I promised to spare your life." A laugh escaped Heiner's torn lips. He didn't live so desperately just to die like this. He had to live. He had to return alive. What's so funny? Apparently the interrogator thought Heiner had lost his reason after severe interrogation and torture. "Your life will be spared." Those words were very tempting, but Heiner knew, even if he were to return alive, the Marquis would get rid of him for disclosing the secret. The only way to survive was to keep his mouth shut until the end, and wait for rescue. Heiner chuckled and said, I will soon go crazy because of the overdose of medicine, or might even die here. What can you do? Your technical skills are far inferior to those of Pedonia. I have no intention of speaking, so do your best torturing me. Heiner didn't want to die, he couldn't die so vainly without saying a word to her, he wanted to meet her again. The interrogator walked in front of Heiner with the club, then placed it on Heiner's shoulder. Heiner grunted painfully and twisted his upper body, but he could not move his body properly because his arms were bound. The club hit him everywhere. A heavy, dull pain surged into his shoulder, swollen and bruised. His ruptured body was severely vulnerable to violence. Heiner was beaten mercilessly, unable to even scream properly. After beating him for a while, the interrogator ordered the guards to do something. Heiner's almost closed eyelids trembled, blood dribbled from his mouth, his eyes flashed constantly. Still, Annette was in his head. If I come back alive and see you, I will definitely try to talk to you. I'll stop hiding by the window and spy on you. I want to look into your beautiful eyes and talk to you. A subtle heat was felt. A flame was burning in a large can that the guard had brought with him. A searing heat fell on his bare skin. It was a horrible pain that he had never experienced before, even though he had lived a life spelled with pain. Screams filled the interrogation room. The interrogators and guards chuckled as he struggled. His tightly torn lips parted through clenched teeth, and fingernails dug into his palms. The smell of burnt flesh wafted past his nose. Come to think of it, he had never pronounced her name out loud. He mustered the courage to say her name, Annette Rosenberg. Heiner was again confined to his cell. The burned wound in his chest was repeatedly festered and ruptured. He was terribly ill all night. His whole body was burning hot and painful. He gasped, struggling to even breathe, and at one point he was so cold that he clutched himself and shivered. He had no idea how much time had passed. In the darkness, Heiner thought and thought of the girl over and over again, engulfed in pain and loneliness. Sometimes he missed Annette, sometimes he admired her, sometimes he resented her, and sometimes he hated her. Unexpressed thoughts spread their branches out of alignment. Annette Rosenberg, you know nothing of what is going on. All you do is sit gracefully at the piano and play whatever you want. You, the daughter of a marquis, know nothing of what I endure these works for. Heiner hated her and resented her terribly, but before long he missed her again. Annette Rosenberg, it wasn't your fault, you were just born too precious. Only, no one told you these things. When you find out, you will think something is wrong with this world. You will feel sorry, you will be angry, because your soul is as noble and pure as your performance. One day, war broke out in France. It was Rutland's war for independence from France. The chances of winning the war tilted to the side of Rutland. Taking advantage of the chaos, Heiner and a few surviving colleagues stole France's secrets and escaped. He also burned the records that his colleagues had disclosed. In the process, 2 colleagues whose condition was serious got eliminated. In the end, apart from Jackson, Heiner and Anne were the only survivors. By the time they reached the border, Heiner turned around, re-gripping his pistol. Anne was following him, breathing heavily. Heiner, what's wrong? Anne asked him curiously. Heiner raised the muzzle of his stolen gun without answering. Anne's hand, which was wiping the sweat from her forehead, stopped. The air felt cool. She muttered with a small, disappointed voice, yeah, that's right. I was the one who revealed the secrets. A traitor deserves to be punished. Kill me immediately. If the Marquis found out about her betrayal, she wouldn't be able to die in peace anyway. Even if not for this reason, Anne was a traitor who had leaked state secrets. Traitors should be punished. It was a sentence they had learned so well that it was etched into their brain. Anne, who had come from the same training camp, knew this, and that was why she said what she did. Gunshots echoed through the forest. The moment seemed very slow to Heiner. It was as if a chain of images were being shot in sequence. Why did he kill her? He couldn't quite remember why. His mind was hazy. Because she was a traitor. Traitors must be dealt with. But what did Anne betray? Suddenly the small question popped into his head. The answer came shortly. The motherland, their homeland. But was it really their homeland? Who was Pedonia a homeland for? His thoughts tangled in a mess, but the end pointed to a truth whose shape was unknown. It was an emotion he had never felt before. Even though he had killed countless people, Heiner backed away slowly. The grass felt heavy and sticky under his feet. He turned and fled. The forest rustled in the wind. In his blurry vision, the whole forest was red. Heiner ran through the red grass. He ran and ran. He kept running because he still had to live. He remembered Anne's words, "Heiner, what do you hold dear?" He had to make it home alive, to where his precious things were. His breath came in choked gasps. The sensation of pain engulfed his wounded body, the screams of his colleagues and the smell of blood trailing behind him, but he kept running. Heiner was invited to the Rosenberg residence for the first time after many years. "Everyone, today we celebrate the return of our hero, Heiner Valdemar," said Marcus cheerfully. It was his first visit as a reserve officer about to be commissioned, not as a trainee spy whose identity could not be revealed. Heiner looked again at the murals on the ceiling. It was as gorgeous and sacred as ever, but he felt no excitement. In the middle of the night, Saint Marianne looked not like a saint, but only like an ordinary woman. The dinner was held in the banquet hall, the pride of the Rosenberg mansion. Heiner was familiar with this place. "Congratulations on your promotion, Valdemar. The Padanian uniform suits you perfectly." "Thank you, sir," Heiner replied politely. "I thought the operation was a complete failure. I didn't expect you to return with those France bastard secrets. Thanks to this, my position has become even more secure." I was very displeased to hear that everyone had been captured, but as expected, something valuable will always shine. Some subordinates even suggested a prisoner exchange, but a survivor like you will always find a way to live. There's no need to waste resources unnecessarily. The drunken Marquis kept talking alone, no matter what Heiner replied or not. Truly regrettable deaths, those vicious France bastards, but still, dying for the country is so honorable. Otherwise they would have died on the streets having accomplished nothing. "Don't you agree?" said Marcus in a tone of exaggerated theatrics. He was still smiling with a face full of liquor. "That's correct. It must have been their greatest honor," Heiner replied and filled Marquis's cup. Blood-red wine filled the glass to the brim. Once in the room, Heiner opened the window. It was then that he finally had a chance to catch his breath a little. Many things passed through his mind. Some of them were the words of the Marquis. The Marquis never intended to negotiate a prisoner exchange, or send reinforcements in the first place. Those who crossed into enemy territory, and endured torture for their homeland, and those of us who served the Marquis loyally without regard for our lives, were abandoned from the start, without a grave or a small tombstone to mark their names. They crumbled into dust in a distant land. Nevertheless, the operation was a success. Thanks to my efforts, the Marquis gained unassailable power. It's all over now. It's over. Heiner quietly let out an empty laugh. What am I doing with my life? He wondered vacantly as he stood by the window. The night wind that flowed into the room was cold. It was a particularly sunny day. After washing up and having a quick breakfast, Heiner went out to the rose garden like an old habit. The sun shone on the empty garden. The warm light seemed to blur his mind. He walked where his feet took him, walking aimlessly. Heiner suddenly stopped in the middle of the path. He realized belatedly that he was heading for the practice room. Heiner lowered his head and stared at his feet. His eyes met his shadow against the light. The shadow was exceptionally dark. The practice room had long since been moved deeper into the mansion. She would not be there either. So where exactly was he going? Heiner asked himself. He could never forget that time in prison. Painful heat crawled along the letters engraved on his chest. Heiner gritted his teeth. What in the world was he going to do when he met her with a body full of wounds and scars? Everything was vague. He was living this way for that one woman, but the place he came back to was very bright and unfamiliar. Let's go back, he thought, but for some reason his feet wouldn't move. He struggled to turn his body. At that moment, he suddenly heard a rustling sound nearby. With characteristic agility, Heiner noticed that it was the presence of a person. About 10 paces away, the shape of a white umbrella flickered. A woman in a light blue dress was walking toward him. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Little by little, the thoughts in his head, which straddled the border between consciousness and unconsciousness, became clearer. While he stood there in a daze, she was getting closer before he knew it. Annette stopped 2 steps away. A gentle voice with a slightly higher tone entered his ears. "Are you all right, sir? You've been standing so still for so long." Heiner wondered if he was dreaming. His fantasy must have gone too far and affected his reality. Heiner, who had been standing there like a nail, finally realized who the woman was. It was her, Annette Rosenberg. He was too nervous to hear her words clearly. Annette asked again, "Excuse me, are you feeling well? Is there anything you need?" Those words belatedly brought Heiner to his senses. He put his hand involuntarily over his trembling lips and slowly shook his head as he replied, "No, I'm fine. I was lost in thoughts for a moment. Oh, I'm sorry for bothering you. No, it's fine. That's a relief." Annette smiled, as if it was fortunate. Unable to take his eyes off her face, Heiner couldn't help but smile along with her. "I see you are a soldier, so you must be a guest of my father's," Annette said. "Do you know me?" Heiner asked. "No, but you're wearing the Royal Army uniform," Annette replied. "Yes," Heiner replied, not knowing how to interpret Annette's words. Heiner just smiled. It was obvious that his smile was unnatural, but it couldn't be helped. He drew and redrew countless scenes of meeting her, but the moment he actually faced her, his mind went blank. Heiner managed to open his mouth without direction to continue the conversation. "I have been overseas for a long time for operations, and am about to be officially appointed. I had visited the Rosenberg residence many times before. You don't know me, but I have actually known about you for a long time, father." Heiner lost his train of thought. "What took you so long?" said Annette as she rushed toward the marquee. Heiner looked back a step later. "You must have drank too much again yesterday. I told you to stop that habit of yours." Annette bruised the marquis with a worried voice. "I'm sorry for being late," said Marquis. "At first glance, the father and daughter had a close relationship. The only daughter I have is nagging me every day. But more importantly, when did the two of you meet?" asked the Marquis. "I just met him. It seems he was taking a walk in the garden," Annette replied. Their gazes turned to Heiner. "I was supposed to meet him here in the garden, but I completely forgot. I rushed out in such a hurry that I ended up looking like a mess. My apologies," the Marquis said with a chuckle. Heiner had been stiff for a while at their intimacy. Annette was the only daughter of Marquis Dietrich. The two were inseparable by blood, and the Marquis was famous for loving his daughter. It was only natural that they should be close, but why on earth did he have this feeling? "This is the first time you two are meeting, right, Annette? This is Mr. Heiner Valdemar, soon to be commander. Valdemar, this is my daughter Annette." The Marquis introduced them to each other. "Yes, it's a real pleasure to meet you. It's an honor." Heiner could not speak well, as if his tongue was frozen. "You look very young, but are you already going to be a commander?" Annette asked in amazement. Valdemar made a big contribution in operation. "He was the only one who came back alive from Munich operation this time," said the Marquis. "Oh, that's him. I have heard a lot about you from my father. You're really amazing." Annette looked up at Heiner with sparkling eyes. Heiner felt the urge to run away from those beautiful eyes. He opened his mouth reluctantly, despite the fact that he knew he shouldn't speak carelessly. "Yes, I'm the only one who made it back alive. All my comrades perished during the operation." Heiner was having hard time talking about his friends. "Yes, the people who gave their lives for the country. My deepest condolences," said Annette. She looked not at all mournful, and said so as if their sacrifice was natural. For an instant, time stopped. Heiner's eyes widened. He couldn't count the number of times he had acted as a spy, and yet he could never quite control his own emotions at this moment. "By the way, when will you be commissioned?" Annette asked. Heiner's mouth was now completely dry. The Marquis laughed and talked with Annette. The air around them felt cold and somber. Heiner's legs were barely tied, as he kept trying to get out of the place. He couldn't remember the details of how he answered the Marquis' question or what he had promised Annette. Everything just flowed absent-mindedly. Then, "Congratulations on your appointment in advance. See you next time." Annette greeted him with her eyes, and her characteristic good-natured, innocent smile. Heiner bowed his head slightly. When he looked up again, the Marquis and Annette had already turned their backs. She chuckled and crossed her arms over the Marquise's. Heiner stepped back. The time that had stopped began to flow again. 2, 3 steps and he staggered backwards like a man who had been shot. Immediately, Heiner turned around and started walking somewhere. "The people who sacrificed their lives for the country. My deepest condolences. At the very least you shouldn't be saying that. Why do you think you can enjoy playing the piano you love so much? For your position, for your family, for your father's status. Do you know how many sacrifices were made?" Heiner gasped and mocked himself madly. A saintess, who the hell was that? He must have been separating Annette from Marquis Dietrich in a part of his mind all along. Annette Rosenberg was no saint. everything was a product of his illusion. She was not the kind of person who could sympathize with pain, sorry for the sufferings, or outrage at the unfairness. Everything he had about the woman was an illusion. It was literally nothing more than a fantasy. He could tell just by talking to her for the first time. A guttural laugh erupted mixed with hard cough. For someone like you, me, my life, my pain, all of us, everyone sacrificed everything. For someone like you. Heiner heard the sounds of what had been inside him breaking and distorting, deeply rooted. They changed shape on their own and stabbed inside. Annette Rosenberg, I miss you, I yearn for you, I resent you, I hate you. So Annette Rosenberg, you have to take accountability. After the Munich operation, which he thought had failed, Heiner miraculously returned with even France's secrets. There were reports of revolutionary groups forming within the Kingdom of Padania. News of the Padania Revolutionary Army being established was shared. The activities of the Revolutionary Army could potentially incite conflicts within the military forces. Normally he would have reported this to the Marquis, but he started harboring a desire to overthrow him. After that, Heiner occasionally passed on military information and supplies, large and small, anonymously to the Revolutionary Army. He did so knowing that if he was discovered he would be summarily executed. It was not because he had a great sense of justice or a sense of purpose. It was motivated by the outbursts of a broken and distorted mind. I hope you despair as much as I despair. I hope you lose as much as I lost. Just as you were present in my moments of misfortune, may I be present in yours. May your life be as dark as mine has been for so long. You have to take accountability one way or another. Since it is your fault I'm like this, having so much blood on his hands, having lived this way, someone had to take the blame. No matter how, it was entirely the woman's fault, his twisted mind convinced.